You are listening to In Conversation with Jennie and Mark.
Well, hello. Welcome to In Conversation with Jennie and Mark. I am the Reverend Mark Adams, Vicar of St Margaret's, Barking.
And hello, I am the Reverend Jennie Adams, the priest in charge of Holy Trinity, Prince Consort Road, South Kensington. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome, and we are going to go straight in because this week is Remembrance Sunday. Always a difficult one, I think, don't you?
It is a challenging Sunday, but it's a big Sunday for us. We have a big civic service when the great and the good come to St Margaret, so it's also an important one.
Do you have to hit 11 o'clock exactly as well?
We have to hit 11 o'clock and parades and all sorts of stuff. It's really good, actually. I enjoy it. But it's a challenge, and it's always a challenge to get the sermon right. So I'm looking forward to hearing your wisdom today, Jennie, about it, what we can say.
Fine.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely. I'm relying on you now.
It's all going downhill from now on. So we are going to look at Job, and we do recognise it in the lectionary reading. It says Job 19:23 to 27a. However, Mark has extended this. So we're going to look at chapter 19, verses 1 to 2 and 19 to 27. And I will read it, and then he will explain why we have extended this. Okay.
Sounds good. Well, I've put it on the screen, Jennie, so read away.
I'm going. Then Job answered, "How long tempt me and break me in pieces with words? All my intimate friends abhor me, and those whom I loved have turned against me. My bones cling to my skin and to my flesh, and I have escaped by the skin of my teeth. Have pity on me, O you, my friends, for the hand of God has touched me. Why do you, like God, pursue me, never satisfied with my flesh? Oh, that my words were written down. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book. Oh, that with an iron pen and with lead they were engraved on a rock forever. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and that at the last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been thus destroyed, then in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see on my side, and my eyes shall behold, and not another." So tell us, Mark, because there must be a reason why you've got extra verses in this.
Why have I put extra verses in? Because it picks it up from verse 23, which is of course the really famous bit. If you're anything like me and know the Handel's Messiah, you know that's the bit which I'm not going to try and sing, but is amazing. After the Hallelujah chorus, I know that my Redeemer lives, been made really famous by that. And of course, it's a lovely and beautiful passage that holds out the hope of resurrection and new life, and in many ways is a foreshadowing of the resurrection in the Old Testament. And we could probably talk a bit more about that. But so we want that for Remembrance Sunday, which I'm assuming is why it's been chosen by the lectionary compilers. But it doesn't seem to me to do justice to the horrors of Remembrance Sunday. It's all going to be fine. Don't worry about all this war stuff. It's all going to be okay in the end. But
yes,
you've got to get to the end, and you've got to. And actually, those verses before actually, in one sense, also speak about suffering and about Job's suffering. And actually, in a way that is obviously Job's all poetry, really, but is quite poetic, and poems and stuff are important within war poetry and stuff, aren't they? So that seems to speak into that. So you don't just jump into it's all lovely, we're all going to be fine. No, it's pretty
difficult. It's okay if you're dead because there's a whole world that's coming. Yes.
Yeah. And you can pull it out within the context of Job's bigger story, but that's why I wanted to extend it.
Yeah, fair dues. That seems a good reason. You're absolutely right. I think it is a bit all is okay without actually facing the horrors of war and the horrors of suffering today. I mean, it's all going on. It's not something of the past that we can now think it's all done, is it? So,
and I definitely don't think I'm pulling that out of context, because I'm not. That is the context.
No, it's exactly what it's about.
Yeah.
In fact, if anything, it did feel a little bit that the lectionary reading itself was out of context.
Yes.
They really just sit in the midst of a lot of suffering, quite a lot of moaning, but I mean, justified moaning, but quite a lot of moaning from Job.
Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. I'm, Job, and then the 1 to 2 bit is just to give it a little bit of introduction. So this is, if you know anything about Job, Job is in an ongoing dialogue with his scare quotes friends, who would be much better if they just shut up, really. But yes, he is having a bad time, isn't he? Job has a bad time. We could say a little bit more about that, but I don't know how
He
much.
is having a bad time. I think we give his friends a bad press. I mean, they're not the most helpful, but they are there.
They are there. They are there.
They are
Uh,
there.
for
And
those
they're,
of
they're
just
just
to
trying to make sense of it, aren't they? And what they
Yeah, I mean, a
already
bit of an intro to Job, isn't it? Job's a set-up story, really. It has this bit at the beginning in the heavenly court, where basically Job is declared to be innocent, but he suffers, and therefore the question behind it is, why do innocent people suffer? Seems to be my nutshell setup of the story of Job. And his friends come along. For the first week, they sit in silence, and then they open their mouths, and the trouble starts. So that's what I think about Job. It'd be much better if they just shut up.
It is a great story. It's worth
Yeah.
reading from
But I
beginning to
think there's some really interesting things in this first part of this, which, you know,
okay.
when you read some of the horrific stories of the First World War, Second World War, wars today, you know, why do all my intimate friends have bore me? Those whom I loved have turned against me. You know,
Yes.
my bones cling to my skin and to my flesh, and I've escaped by the skin of my teeth.
Actually, we could just start with that because actually
Yeah.
that's relevant with what's going on today, really, isn't it?
Yes.
The wars we know, people have had friends that have suddenly turned against them. We're looking at Ukraine and Russia. We're looking at Holy Land. There are people where there were friendships across the borders that now are, so to
And
speak.
even if you think about the wars that we have fought,
Mm.
that I mean, the First World War is famously called, isn't it, a family quarrel that got out of hand, because all the royalty of that time were all related. I mean, actually, of course, our royal family had to change their name because their name was Germanic, and then suddenly we're at war because
Yes.
basically, yeah, that's when they changed their name to Windsor, which they are now. So, there's a real lot of yeah, it is basically, we turn
Well, I
against each
can.
other as within the human family, don't we?
I mean, yeah. So I'm going to say even not within war countries, war-torn countries. But so there are a lot of students in my parish, and at Freshers Week, I spoke to someone who was in their second year, Russian, and she said like really quite awkward. She just went Russia. I'm from Russia. Sorry about that. But like, yeah, she'd had a really difficult time. There's a lot of protests and things like that on behalf of Ukraine, but she's a Russian student sitting amongst that. It's quite difficult to know that your country are at war and the implications it has as well further down the line.
And then I think
Um,
verse 22 is a really interesting one as well. Why do you like God pursue me? This is talking to his friends, I guess. Why do you like God pursue me, never satisfied with my flesh? And I think there's some really interesting things in that verse because again, picking up this idea, I suppose, of,
Mm.
it's we turn against each other.
Yeah,
That God, in a sense, is pursuing Job. That's very much Job's view, isn't it? And that nothing is outside God's sovereignty. And this idea, again, thinking about remembrance, never satisfied with my flesh. There is a sense in which war, as a thing, is never satisfied, is it? You can, there's never enough,
no,
and even when they talk about the war in Ukraine, they talk about the meat grinder, which is just a horrible, horrible
yeah.
image. But you know,
Hmm.
that there is a sense in which it seems to war as a kind of thing seems to be ever consuming and ever,
Yes.
eating people and destroying people. Um, and yeah, I just think that's an interesting thing to reflect on in the context of remembrance. What do you think?
Yeah. That
That's okay.
I don't know how to expand on that. I think you're right. I do. Yeah, war never seems to be. But then, okay, because we are honouring the people that have given their lives and had gone to war. So the thing is, you do have to fight for peace. Um, I'm not such a pacifist that I think war is never necessary. I wish it was, but I think it's idealistic.
Mm.
And I think peace is like love. You have to choose to love. You have to choose peace. And sometimes you have to stand up to what is wrong to gain peace. And that's pretty much how wars start, really. Yeah, so I do think that needs to be included, really. I think we can kind of go, oh, war is this terrible thing, but actually these people have been part of it and are still going on now. They're not bad people. They're fighting for their country.
I think that this is, I mean, I always have found
Mm.
Remembrance Sunday difficult, because I often wonder I mean, I've been blessed
Mm.
in that I've been born into a time where my nation has not been at war and I've not been conscripted into the army.
Mm.
I mean, I know we've had wars, right? And I'm not trying to diminish that, but not
No.
on the scale of 19 of the First and Second World War or whatever, when
Yeah.
we were all conscripted in and we
Mm.
didn't have a choice. I'm not trying to say that to take away the fact that, you know, people have suffered in Afghanistan and Iraq, and of course I recognise that, but and the Falklands, but yeah, how would I have reacted? And because I'm a bit of a pacifist at heart, really. There is a, but
Yeah,
is
I
it,
think more so than I am, really.
more
I
so
think,
than you are, I think, really.
yeah, you can
And
consider me
and
an
that's part of my
arrogant.
own part of my own family background. So my grandpa, I was a stretcher bearer in the First World War, and I think I'm pretty sure he wouldn't fight. I think that's right, although I'm not quite sure about that. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the story. So I think. I think it's interesting for me. I feel conflicted about it, you know. But that, you know, when does, I mean, that's why, of course, Christianity developed the idea of the just war, isn't it? Which, you know, still seems to be.
Yeah, which not always successful, is it?
But through this passage, I think we
Mm.
can face the horrors of that and why, you know, it is just the, you know, it's not what God wills for us, is it? Although Job still holds God to account, of course, within this, even with this passage. Why do you like God pursue me? It's like, what are
Yes.
you, how do you picture that?
Well, I mean, he is cross with God. I think that's okay. I think that's okay. Um, it's interesting. So he does blame God. I think I've always assumed that Job was always kind of very true and faithful and God wouldn't do this. But actually, the more I've read it, the more I've realised that he does blame God. Very much so, like we do. In the same way as his friends do. Um, yeah.
Well, of course, I mean, to not getting the whole thing about Job, isn't it? Is that his friends are basically saying you're suffering because you've sinned, and we know from the beginning of the story that Job hasn't sinned and he's still suffering, um, in a particular way, I guess. As, you know, but yeah,
Yeah,
so
so
he still holds God
why are
to.
they meant to suffer? Mhm. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, God doesn't get let off the hook in Job. God
No.
is still responsible for what's going on, and in a sense, but there is a
And I
sense in
think,
which God's big enough to handle it.
oh yeah, well, I remember the end.
I mean, my paraphrase is the end is God really says to Job, "You come and have a go if you think you're hard enough, really."
Yeah, suck
This
it
is
up,
my
mate.
kind
I
of,
made
this is
it.
my very quick paraphrasing of the Book of Job. You know, there's more
I
to
don't think it's even that. It's like, I've made all this. I can do what I like. You suck it up. So yes, it's not the
But
most satisfactory ending, I don't think.
I mean, but neither should we, you know, you've got to get through, you know, we can get to verse 23 to 27, can't we? And these extraordinary words of, you know, in the middle of this, Job seems to have this extraordinary vision of God being with him, you know, and will be with him. I know that my Redeemer lives, and in the last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has thus been destroyed, then in my flesh I shall see God. I mean,
Yeah,
that is, of course, an absolute contradiction because he's just said his skin will be destroyed, and in his flesh he will see God. So that's why I guess we take this as a prefiguring of the resurrection, isn't it? That, you know, that there will be a renewal, that this is not the end, that, you know, that there will be a physical resurrection. This is all part of my understanding, the prefiguring of that as
No, you're
Christians
right.
read
It
it.
does come in the midst of lots of other stuff. But that does happen as well in life nowadays, doesn't it? So when we talk to people about how when they felt that God wasn't there or when they felt that God was close, often there is this kind of revelation in the midst of something terrible happening. So these, I don't know if I've said it before, these are questions that I use in baptism prep sessions to parents who are considering baptism for their children. I've got a series of questions just to make us think about who God is, what God looks like, that
Which
sort
I
of thing.
borrowed anyway, to be fair, and I nicked off you
Yeah,
one.
you do use them as well, yes. But there are two. One is when have you felt close to God? And the other is when have you felt that God wasn't there or didn't care? And I am often struck. I always think that when have you felt close to God has an easy get out because they've all had a baby, and that's quite a spiritual experience as a mother. Um, but actually, many people don't go for that. They will tell me experiences of when they have felt God's presence in quite dire circumstances. So, in terrible illness or accidents or things like that, dangerous situations. So I think I'm just looking at that and thinking how I can connect it on Sunday, but actually, I don't think it's that unusual to have this kind of sudden moment of wisdom and recognition amongst the terrible things that are going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. I think one of the things that I love about Job,
Mm.
as we've sort of said already, and I think that plays into that as well, is that you can hold these two things together. So you can hold together at the same time the fact that I've had these experiences of God, but also that I have felt when God's not there, or I don't understand what's going on, or and I suppose it's interesting, isn't it? We all have a choice, don't we? As we look at a world that's suffering, and we hear of stories of suffering, and we experience suffering ourselves. Do you say, well, okay, I can't possibly believe that God exists, as some do, and some people sort of go in a completely opposite direction. And I don't know why some of us do one and some of us do the other. But I think what I like about Job is he doesn't let God off the hook, as I've said, holds God accountable, and yet also has the hope that this isn't going to be it. There's going to be more, and that
Yeah, so a
you
lot
know,
of the time it's not that he ever goes, oh, God doesn't exist.
mm,
He's just angry that God has let it happen.
yeah, he never says that God doesn't exist. He holds God, but he holds God to account. I mean,
Mm.
one says it's almost like saying God doesn't exist almost lets God off the hook.
That is true. That is true. Now there's a debate.
So I think it's a really fascinating passage.
Mhm,
It's a beautiful passage. It really holds together those two sides of our human experience, of which war
mhm.
is a terrible it is a terrible thing, and yet we also wrestle with it, as you've said, as a
I
as a
think
way
it's a
to bring
necessity, to
peace.
be
Or
honest. In this life, I think it's a
sometimes
necessity.
you've got to fight, is what you're saying. You don't want to, but sometimes you've got to fight.
I think you have to stand up for what is right, and sometimes you have to stand up for the people being oppressed.
Mm, mm.
Um, I think you can't take yourself out of the equation.
And I
Um,
suppose that's where, if you
because
want to get
then,
into the history and theology of it, that's where you have to ask what Christianity has tried to do anyway, at least to say what is a just war, isn't it? It's tried to put some limits around that, because not every war is just, and not every.
yeah, and I'm not suggesting that we have always got it right, but
Mm,
I think it's on a bigger scale of what I think we should be doing as Christians anyway, which is being
mm,
the voice for the oppressed and
mm,
standing up for injustice.
mm.
Um, it's just a massive scale of that. And I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that we've always got that right as
Yeah,
humans. Um,
yeah.
but I think it's idealistic to think it will never happen,
So I
except
think what I'm
on the
going to take
second.
from this is, yes, that it's complicated, that war is messy, as you say. Sometimes we have to make difficult choices, and that this passage actually really does hold together the
Mm,
horror of suffering, and which you
yeah,
can put within the context of war, but also the hope that God is going to turn all this right in the end. And that amazing picture, which of course, and as Christians, we hold that, within the resurrection of Christ, don't we, as the sort of foreshadowing of all of that.
It's what we're waiting for. The second coming and the resurrection.
Yeah.
Okay, so how would you sum it up? Because I'm not sure that I know how to do that. So sum up the thing. Just how would you kind of sum it up for Sunday?
I think what I want people to take in what will really be more of a homily than a sermon, with a lot of different people there, different faiths and different backgrounds, but they've come to honor those who have died in war, and I need to honor that as the preacher. I want to bring this within the overall picture of God as I read about God in Scripture, and I think Job is an important part of that, because Job embraces suffering without letting God off the hook or minimizing it or diminishing it, but also within that holds out hope. And I want to say something about that. And I don't quite know how it's going to come out, if you have to come along to St Margaret's on Sunday morning to see. But I think that's, I want people to see their experience within this passage. And I want to hold out within that experience that God is the God of hope, and that, this is going to come right in the end. And that's what we believe.
Okie dokie. Thank you. That's what I'm going to do too.
That's what you're going to do too. Ditto.
I have no idea yet. You'll have to turn up at Holy Trinity at 11:15
all the best for Remembrance, whatever it is you're doing. And thank you for listening.
Okay. Thank you. And we will be back next week.
We will be back next week as we continue through Sundays before Advent.
Take care all.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to In Conversation with Jennie and Mark. Please subscribe for more episodes on all the usual podcast platforms.